Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Here I'm trying to compile top 50 interview questions for Salesforce developer. So basically this will help you to revise quickly before your interview. So let's go and get started. So what is roll-up summary field in Salesforce? Roll-up summary fields can only be created on master object to calculate count, sum, min or max of a particular field of any child record. Number two, what are the types of email templates available in Salesforce.com? Text, HTML with letterhead, custom HTML, Visual Force. 3. What are the different workflow actions available in workflows? Task, field update, email alert, outbound messaging. 4. What are the different types of reports available in Salesforce? Tabular report, summary report, matrix, and joint report. Can you use sharing rules to restrict data access? No. Sharing rules can only give wider access to data. It cannot restrict data access. 6. How can I give additional permissions to certain associates in a profile using permission sets? 7. Various ways to make pick list as a required through field level, through JavaScript and validation. Can you tell me what is time-based workflow? Time-based workflow process will be activated for an record criteria which is set while building the workflow. Queued process will be re-evaluated the criteria before actually triggering during that time. 9. Please provide possible options on how we can bypass a validation rule for a certain associates with same or different profile. One way, if all these associated belongs to one profile and if no other associates belong to that profile, then we can bypass the validation rule for the entire profile. Other way, we can create hierarchy custom settings. We can have a checkbox field created in that and add the associate to this custom settings and enable the checkbox. And we can refer the hierarchy custom settings in the validation rule to bypass. 10. What is an external ID in Salesforce? Give example. So through external ID, we can set particular field as a unique record identifier for an external system. For example, suppose we have a field Oracle object ID can be stored in Salesforce as an external ID field, and that can be referenced by external applications such as Java to fetch update records in Salesforce using Oracle ID. What is the difference between trigger and workflow and when to use which one? Workflow is basically an automated process that fired an action based on evaluation criteria and rule criteria. We can access workflow across the object. We cannot perform DML operation on workflow. We cannot query from the database. Whereas trigger is a piece of code that executes before or after a record is inserted or updated. We can access the trigger across the object and relate it to that object. So we can perform DML operation as well as SOQL query as well in trigger. 12. When a case is created, validation rule checks for open status when saved. Workflow rule updates status from open to pending. Which one triggers first? Instead of workflow rule, if the same logic is in before trigger, what will happen? So the case would be saved since validation rules fires before workflow rules. And in the case of before trigger fire before validation rules. So user will see an error message from trigger. 13. How to create a many-to-many relationship in Salesforce. In order to create many-to-many relationship in Salesforce, we need to create an object that is called a junction, and we need to create two new fields having a master detail relationship with the two other objects. 14. What are the default access and elements created when a new object is created? Object is created with few standard fields, tab, page layout, and can assign to a profile. 15. On what objects can you create assignment rules, leads and cases? 16. If there are 100 users in a profile and if SSO property is enabled for that profile, if 10 of them should not be having SSO, how can we achieve this? So permission sets cannot be used to remove permissions. So we may need to disable the SSO setting at the profile level and create a permission set for 90 users and have the SSO property enabled. Or we can create another profile, have the SSO property disabled and have the 10 associated added to that profile. 17. What is whoid and whatid in activities? Whoid contains ID of contact or lead. Whatid contains ID of a related object, standard or custom such as account, opportunities, or other objects. There are validation rules built to avoid null field values. If I insert few records with null values for these fields through a data loader, will records be inserted successfully, and what would happen when the records are opened in UI? So records will be inserted successfully through data loader. For user in UI, when opened, it won't allow to save unless values are filled. 19. We have a time-based workflow and there is an action schedule to be executed. If we deactivate the workflow, scheduled actions will be removed from the queue or not. Actions will be performed even if we are deactivated the workflow. So they will go in the queue. So in order to remove the time-based workflow from the action, we have to remove from the queue. 20. Order of execution in Salesforce. Number 1, system validation rule. Number 2, before triggers are executed. Number 3, custom validation rules are checked. Number 4, after triggers are executed. Number 5, assignment rules are executed. Number 6, auto response rules are executed. Number 7, workflow rules are executed. Number 8, before and after triggers are executed one or more time if the workflow rules updates a field. Number 9, escalation rules are executed. Number 10, parent rollup summary formula or cross-object formula fields are updated in the respective objects. Number 11, criteria-based sharing rules are evaluated. Number 12, any post-commit logic is executed, like sending an email. 21, how many ways we can share a record? So one way is role hierarchy. If we add a user to a role, the user is above in the role hierarchy will have read access. So these are the steps that you can access the role hierarchy, right? And OWD defines, OWD defines the baseline setting for the organization. So it stands for org-wide defaults. So it defines the level of access to the user, can see the other user record. If OWD is set to be private, we cannot see other user record. So the uh, public read only is will give you the read access, and public read and write will have open up the access of other user records. Manual sharing. So manual sharing is another way of sharing a single record to single user or group of user. We can see this button detail page of the record, and this is visible only when OWD setting is private. Criteria-based sharing rules. This is another way we can open up the access. If we want to share the record based on the condition, like share records to group of users whose criterias or country is India. So that way we can open. So other way is Apex sharing as well. So through coding also we can share the record. So in the most complex way where there is a requirement to share object, so through Apex we can do that. So share object is available for every object. For example, for account object, share object is account share. If we want to share the records using Apex, we have to create a record to the share object. 22. Which SOQL statement can be used to fetch all records even from the recycle bin? All rows clause of a SOQL can retrieve all records, including the records from the recycle bin. So here is the query. Select count from contact where account ID equals to a.id all rows. Okay. So number 23, what are the aggregate functions supported by Salesforce SOQL? Following aggregate functions are supported by Salesforce: SOQL sum, min, max, count, average, count distinct. What are the different events of trigger? Insert, update, delete, and undelete. Why triggers are used? Triggers enable you to perform custom actions before or after changes to the Salesforce record, such as insertions, updates, or deletions. How to throw custom error on specific field using trigger. Uh, so here is an example for account in trigger.new. So we can refer act.name dot add error is a method. So we can give the error message invalid name on that particular field. How can we get the old value in trigger? So in order to fetch the old value in trigger, so we have a method on the triggers old map dot get. So that will we need to pass the id and we can refer the field name by dot operator. So if we need to update the records, which trigger to be used, before or after triggers? Before triggers only. If you try in after trigger, you will get an error like record is read only. So always remember, if you need to update, always use before trigger. Number 29, how much code coverage is needed for Apex class deployment to production? 75% is needed in order to deploy a class to production. How to get current logged in user ID in Apex? User info dot get user ID. How to verify string values within the test class? System.assert or system.assert equals. In batch Apex, what is the default batch size? 200. In batch Apex, what is the maximum batch size allowed? 2000. In batch Apex, how to set the batch size? So in we can set the batch size with the Database.executeBatch, so that accepts the object variable, and the next parameter is the size. So 5, here we have given 5, so batch size is 5. By default the test class is private, public or global. So by default the test class is always private. What is map class in Apex Salesforce? So map class contains method for the map collection type. A map is a collection of key value pairs where each unique key maps to a single value. Map keys and values can be any data type, primitive types, collection of S object, user defined types, and built in Apex. For example, the following table represent the map of countries and country and the currency countries. Like the key is the country, United States, Japan, France, and India, and the currency is for the respective country is dollar, yen, euro, pound, rupee. Explain consideration for static keyword in Apex. Apex classes cannot be static. Static allowed only in outer class. Static variables not transferred as a part of view state. Static variables and static blocks runs in order in which they are written. Static variables are static only in scope of request. Number 38. What is the difference between public and global class in Apex? Public class can be accessed within application or namespace. This is not exactly like public modifier in Java. Global class visible everywhere. Any application namespace web service must be declared as global, which can be accessed inside JavaScript also. It is like a public modifier in Java. How to prevent recursive updates from a trigger? So in order to prevent recursive updates in a trigger, we need to create a public static boolean variables in public class with default values true. Within trigger, check whether the static variable is true before code execution. Once trigger code execute is complete, set the static variable to false. This way trigger code will only execute once. Number 40. List different collection types in Salesforce. List, set, and map. 41. In test class, how to load data from CSV file uploaded as a static resource. So we have a method for test class, test.load data, so that accepts custom object dot s object type as a parameter, and name of the static resource. So these are the parameters this will accept, and you can load the data through CSV file. How can you convert a trigger into a string? So we have a method string dot value of, and we can pass the integer name. How to control transaction in Apex code syntax. So using save points and rollback, we can control a transaction in Apex. So syntax is save point, database dot set save point is a method, and another is database dot rollback. So when what is with sharing in Apex class code? When you use with sharing, user permission and field level security are respected. In case of without sharing, code runs in system mode. What is batch Apex class in Salesforce and what is Apex scheduler? Batch Apex allows you to define a single job that can be broken up into manageable chunks, whereas every chunk can be processed separately. In batch Apex, it will fetch all the records on which you want to perform the field update or divide them into a list of 200 records. On every 200 records, operation is performed separately. So this would help us to execute on more than 10,000 records, as it won't perform an operation on all records in a single transaction. Instead, it is dividing them into the number of subtasks, where each subtask contain the records up to um, 4,000, and it will invoke Apex class to, so it should be 2,000. Maximum is 2,000, my correction. It will invoke the Apex class to run at specific time. Explain few consideration for at the rate future annotation in Apex. So a method must be static in future annotation and cannot return anything. It should be void. To test, to test at the rate future method, you should use start test and stop test to make it synchronous inside test class. Paramet Parameter to future method can only be primitive or collection of primitive data type. Okay, cannot be used inside VF in Visual Force in constructor, set, or get methods. Future method cannot call any other future method. 47. What is wrapper class? Wrapper class is a class whose instance are collection of other objects. It is used to display different objects on a Visual Force page in a same table. What is the difference between system schedule and database execute batch method? So system schedule is basically to schedule the class to run at the specific time by a cron expression, whereas database.executeBatch is a way to begin a batch job. Uh, when you call a database.executeBatch, Salesforce only it adds a process to the queue. Actual execution may be delays based on the availability. What are the advantages of using batch Apex instead of a trigger? A batch class allows you to define a single job that can be broken into manageable chunks and that will be processed separately. If you have more than 10,000 account records in your org, this is impossible without some breaking it up. So uh, whereas insert DML statement and database insert DML statement method in a bulk operation, if an error occurs, the execution will stop and the Apex code throws an error which can be handled in try catch block. Whereas database insert, if an error occurs, the remaining record will be inserted and updated, means partial DML operation will be done. So the next question is related to the previous question, but in more detail. Which one to choose between DML statement and database class method? So we have to choose DML statement if you want any error that occurs during bulk operation DML processing to be thrown as an Apex exception that immediately interrupts control flow. So basically this will uh, if we are not interested in the partial insertion of records, where so we can use database class method if you want to if we are interested in partial success of DML operation. If a record fails, the remainder of the DML operation can still succeed. Your application can then inspect the rejected records and possibly retry the operation. When using this form, you can write code that never throws DML exception errors. Instead, we can code in a way that appropriate results array to judge the success failure. So here is the end of the top 50 questions. So I'll make more videos in order to help you in interview preparation. So I'll connect you in another video. Thanks for watching my videos.